Welcome to the Deep Dive, the Remedify Coaching Program podcast. Our goal here is always to take really complex foundational material and, distill it down into genuine, actionable knowledge.
It's all about providing that shortcut to being truly well-informed.
Exactly. It fits right into the principles of structured, effective learning we talk about so much in the Remedify program.
And today, wow, we have one of the most intellectually compelling subjects you could possibly tackle. We're looking at a huge body of source material, a really comprehensive list of Old Testament passages.
Passages that are traditionally understood to predict the Messiah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And the structure of the sources we're using is key. It allows us to trace this whole narrative.
Okay, let's unpack that a little. When you say trace the narrative, we're talking about texts written across, 1,000 years? More?
Oh, easily. Across different empires, different languages, completely different geopolitical landscapes.
And the mission for this deep dive is to follow that thread, to look at the ultimate convergence of all these diverse prophetic lines.
Right. Prophecies that detail everything.
Yeah.
His coming, his life, the suffering, his death, and then the resurrection of this promised figure who Christians identify as Jesus Christ.
The sheer scope is, as you said, it's just astonishing. A prophetic arc over a millennium, multiple authors who couldn't have possibly collaborated.
And yet, they deliver a single, cohesive, and this is the important part, a highly specific narrative.
That convergence, that's really the intellectual centerpiece for us today.
It is. So if you're out there preparing for a meeting, doing research, or you just want that profound knowledge, understanding this structure is, well, it's invaluable.
And I love how our source material is organized. It's not just a random list of verses. It's grouped logically.
Methodically, by theme. You have identity, then ministry, then rejection.
Suffering, resurrection, and finally, exaltation.
Yeah. And that structure lets us trace the development, piece by prophetic piece. It's like watching a high-resolution image come into focus over centuries.
So the core thesis we're exploring is how these incredibly diverse texts build this detailed, complex, and honestly sometimes paradoxical identity for one single figure.
It's a blueprint of specific requirements, geographical, ancestral, physical, spiritual, that all have to align perfectly.
So where do we begin?
Let's start at the very beginning, the absolute foundation of his identity.
We're setting the stage with the earliest prophecies, the lineage. And this starts, almost at the dawn of the human story itself in the text.
It does. We have to start with the foundational promise in Genesis 3.15. It's often called the proto-evangelium.
The first gospel.
The first gospel, yeah. It's this primary foreshadowing of a conflict, but also a victory. It says the seed of the woman will crush the serpent's head.
While the serpent wounds his heel.
Right. And this is so crucial because it immediately frames the Messiah not just as some, temporal king or a local leader.
No, this is cosmic.
It's a cosmic conflict between good and evil. His whole purpose is defined right from the outset as redemptive and confrontational.
And what's incredible is how quickly that very broad promise starts to get funneled down, to make the identity verifiable. It doesn't just stay as a general promise to all of humanity.
Not at all. And our sources point to two critical passages right there in Genesis that do the first major narrowing. Genesis 12.3 and 22.18.
Which connect the promise directly to one man, Abraham.
This is a massive theological funnel. The promise is now that all nations on earth will be blessed, but specifically through Abraham's seed, his descendant.
So it establishes a kind of dual scope right away.
A perfect way to put it. The Messiah has to be a physical descendant of Abraham, which links him to the Hebrew covenant, but his ultimate impact is global. It's universal.
So he's not just a savior for one tribe.
He's a blessing for all of humanity. But that global scope is then immediately filtered again through national and then tribal lines.
Okay, so let's follow that. We move forward in Genesis to chapter 49, verse 10, and the focus narrows, dramatically.
It does. This is the prophecy of Jacob to his sons on his deathbed. And he specifies that the ruler, often called Shiloh here, must come specifically from one tribe.
The tribe of Judah.
From Judah. Now, that word Shiloh is layered. Its exact meaning is debated, maybe he whose it is or tranquility, but the context is crystal clear.
It's talking about a sovereign ruler.
A sovereign ruler who brings peace and to whom everyone will give their obedience. This one prophecy eliminates 11 other possibilities. It locks the political and tribal line in place centuries before Israel even had a king.
It's a historical lock on the lineage.
It is. And then, within that tribe, A specific royal house is chosen,
So now we jump forward a few hundred years to 2 Samuel chapter 7.
and the promise is sealed to the house of David. The prophecy God gives to King David isn't just for a temporary dynasty like, his son will be king.
No, it's much bigger. It's an eternal kingdom.
An eternal kingdom guaranteed through his lineage. This promise of perpetuity, of kingship that transcends any human lifespan. It's a covenant for an everlasting throne.
So a physical reality, a king on a throne in Jerusalem that points toward an infinite spiritual reign.
Precisely. But what's fascinating is how these ancestral and tribal requirements are immediately layered with other kinds of specifics. Supernatural ones, geographical ones.
The lineage has to be perfect, but that's not enough. The birth itself has to be unique and, well, pinpointed.
Pinpointed is the word. Our sources point us to Micah 5.2. This gives us the precise geographical requirement.
The Messiah must be born in Bethlehem, Ephrathah.
Right, not just any Bethlehem. And you have to ask, why that detail?
Ephrathah.
Yeah, why add that?
Well, it's critical for historical verification. Bethlehem was a pretty commonplace name. Adding Ephrathah, the ancient name for that specific area, differentiates it. It reminds the reader of its connection to Rachel, to the Davidic line.
And it creates this incredible irony, doesn't it? The eternal ruler, the king of everything, has to come not from the capital, Jerusalem.
Not from the seat of power, no, but from this tiny, seemingly insignificant town. Too little to be among the clans of Judah, as the text says. It's a physical signpost, verifiable by anyone living at that time.
Absolutely. And then you pair that very specific place with a very unique method of birth.
Isaiah 7.14. The prophecy that a virgin shall conceive and bear a son.
And that he will be called Emmanuel.
Which means God with us.
God with us. I mean, that name is the central paradox of the whole identity. It fuses this completely impossible, unprecedented human circumstance of virgin birth with a divine identity.
So the Messiah isn't just like a man who is empowered by God.
No. He is fundamentally the presence of God among humanity. This one prophecy, given during a time of intense political crisis in Judah, it just shifts the entire focus from a temporary political fix to an eternal divine presence.
And that divine identity, it gets affirmed and explored in even more detail later on.
Oh, absolutely. Isaiah comes back to it.
Isaiah 9 verses 6 and 7. This is a much deeper dive into his names, his kingship. A child is born, a son is given.
But then look at the titles. These titles surpass any human monarch. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace.
And we have to stop on those middle two, Mighty God and Everlasting Father.
You really do. We can't overstate how radical that would have sounded. In strict Jewish monotheism, those titles, El Gibber, Aviad, they belong to Yahweh alone.
So this is an explicit declaration of deity.
It confirms the inherent divine nature of the Messiah, right alongside his human lineage. This is where the tension becomes so acute. A baby, born of a woman, yet he bears the very titles of the eternal creator. It's a requirement of the blueprint.
So if his identity is sealed as God incarnate and king, what does that say about the nature of his authority, his righteousness?
It means his authority must be eternal and absolute, not subject to, human whims or moral failure. Psalm 45 confirms this.
It says directly, your throne, O God, is forever and ever.
The language is unambiguous. It equates the king's throne with the throne of God Almighty. It establishes an eternal dominion that no human king could ever claim.
And if that wasn't clear enough, our sources point to Jeremiah 23.
Yes, verses 5 and 6, where he is given a name, the Lord our righteousness.
Yahweh Tzidkenu.
Which is perhaps the ultimate claim to divinity, embedded in the entire identity. The name doesn't just mean the king is righteous. It links his very identity to the divine name, Yahweh. It implies he is the source of righteousness.
His job isn't just to judge justly.
It's to embody and grant righteousness itself. This fusion of God's name with the king's function is the final proof. The Messiah must be divine.
Okay. So let's just recap. The Messiah has to be a descendant of Abraham, from the tribe of Judah, from the royal line of David, born in the small town of Bethlehem, to a virgin, and be God incarnate, holding eternal dominion.
Yeah. That is an incredibly specific set of requirements built up over hundreds of years of prophecy, impossible to meet by chance.
The foundation is laid. So now we have to move from the static markers of who he is to the dynamic action of what he will do.
From identity to ministry.
Right. We're transitioning from the king's identity to his, let's call it a job description. What specific, observable, verifiable actions did the prophets lay out?
The ministry had to provide immediate, incontrovertible proof of his identity when he arrived. And the prophets were meticulous about this. They focused on actions that really only divine power could accomplish.
But performed in a way that addressed real human need.
Exactly. Our sources highlight the practical, visible ministry described in Isaiah 35.
These are the physical acts that prove his identity. The blind see, the deaf hear, the lame walk, the mute speak.
And you have to understand, these aren't just random displays of power, like magic tricks. They are acts of restoration.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in the ancient world, many people believed that these kinds of physical afflictions, blindness, deafness, were tied to deep spiritual depravity, or even a direct judgment from God,
So to reverse them instantly.
was seen as a divine act of ultimate restoration and authority. It's a sign that God was undoing the curse of the fall, right there in front of you. These were specific, immediate, visible authentications.
And paired with those physical miracles, you have the socio-spiritual mission statement. That's from Isaiah 61.
Yes, verses 1 and 2. Bringing good news to the poor, liberty to captives.
This highlights the holistic nature of the mission, doesn't it? It's not just about souls, it's about people.
It addresses both physical circumstances and spiritual standing. Good news to the poor meant hope and inclusion for those on the margins of society. Liberty to captives speaks both to literal release, but more profoundly, to spiritual release from the captivity of sin and death.
It establishes his mission as being fundamentally about social equity and spiritual healing.
Both at the same time.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, methodologically speaking. Our sources include Psalm 78, which predicted that the Messiah would teach in parables.
Right.
Why does the teaching method matter so much that it had to be prophesied centuries beforehand?
That's a great question. Because for a king who is meant to establish an eternal kingdom, you'd expect, what? Legislative decrees,
Yeah.
clear doctrines, military commands.
Something straightforward.
Exactly. Instead, the prophecy points to a teaching style that relies on metaphor, mystery, layered meaning. The psalm says it's to utter dark sayings of old.
A pedagogical style.
A very specific one, designed to challenge the listener. It would reveal truth to those who are earnestly seeking it, but it would simultaneously conceal it from those who approach the message with cynicism or, their minds already made up.
It's a very unexpected method of instruction for a world-changing king.
Very. And then we have to discuss the role of the servant, which is such a huge theme running through Isaiah.
Right, Isaiah 42, it develops this concept of the servant who brings justice and acts as a light to the nations.
And this introduces this element of quiet authority and, again, global scope. The servant figure is characterized by meekness. It says he will not cry aloud or lift up his voice in the street.
So his work is revolutionary, but it's not militaristic.
It's completely non-militaristic.
Yeah.
The dual role here is critical. He brings justice, which means covenantal faithfulness to Israel, but at the same time, he extends salvation and knowledge to the entire Gentile world.
Which reinforces that international scope that was first introduced all the way back with Abraham.
Absolutely. The servant's identity cannot be contained by national borders. His role is to be a covenant for the people, a light to the nations, opening eyes that are blind, bringing prisoners out of dungeons. The whole ministry is defined by selfless service and expansive influence.
And finally, there's a crucial detail about the timeline, a kind of chronological checkpoint.
The need for a harbinger.
The messenger.
Yes. The necessity of preparation is laid out in Malachi 3.1. It sets out the crucial role of a messenger who prepares the way of the Lord.
So the Messiah wouldn't just appear out of nowhere.
No. He wouldn't just appear spontaneously, bypassing the whole existing religious structure. He would be preceded by a specific figure whose job was to announce his imminent arrival, to clear the way, and prepare people spiritually for his presence.
The messenger ensures that when the Messiah arrives, there are witnesses ready to testify that the prophetic timeline is being fulfilled.
It's another verifiable checkpoint.
That sets the stage beautifully. We have the identity sealed, the ministry planned out, but this leads directly to the most jarring part of the entire narrative.
The paradox.
The paradox. Why would a divinely identified figure who performs undeniable miracles be rejected?
This is the central, often misunderstood part of the whole story. If the king is mighty God, why would the divine plan not just allow, but necessitate failure and death?
It's so counterintuitive. If someone shows up and fulfills all these specific genealogical and miraculous requirements, why wouldn't they be universally embraced?
Because, as the prophets understood, the kind of kingdom the Messiah was offering was fundamentally different from the temporal, military kingdom many people were expecting.
So the failure wasn't an accident of history.
It was intentionally woven into the fabric of the ultimate success.
Okay, let's start with the cornerstone paradox. That's from Psalm 118. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone.
This statement is just profound. It directly links rejection with foundation.
Mm,
The builders here is a metaphor for the religious and political authorities of Israel.
the establishment.
The establishment, exactly. When they discard the Messiah, the stone, they think they're getting rid of a threat or maybe a failed experiment.
Yeah.
But in a great reversal, God takes that very same discarded stone and makes it the cornerstone, the structural foundation of his new eternal temple.
The ultimate reversal of human judgments.
And that reversal is what provides the stability for the whole divine plan.
And the emotional core of this rejection is laid bare in Isaiah 53, verse 3. He's described as despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief.
This is a deep psychological profile of inevitable misunderstanding. He isn't just ignored, he's actively scorned by people who judge him based on his meek appearance or his lack of political power.
The prophetic literature shows his suffering is meant to be relational and emotional, not just physical.
Absolutely. He will be intimately acquainted with human pain and human scorn.
And the sadness is just heightened by the nature of the betrayal. It's not just rejection by enemies. It's the intimate betrayal predicted in Psalm 41.9.
My close friend in whom I trusted who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me.
Betrayal by someone who ate with you.
The height of suffering is so often betrayal from within your trusted circle. This detail just heightens the personal drama. It's a breach of covenantal hospitality, of deep trust. This prophecy ensures the Messiah's suffering involves deep psychological pain inflicted by those closest to him.
And then we come to the detail that still, it just surprises me every time we discuss these sources. The specific, almost absurdly trivial financial marker.
Zechariah 11.
The price tag of the betrayal. 30 pieces of silver.
Think about the historical specificity of that. 30 pieces of silver wasn't a random number. In Exodus 21, it was the compensation mandated for a slave who was accidentally gored and killed by an ox.
So it was the legal price of a slave.
It was the price of a dead slave. By being sold for this specific low amount, the prophecy reduces the eternal king, the mighty God, to the transactional value of a common servant.
And the prophecy doesn't even stop there, does it? It talks about the fate of the money.
It does. It continues, detailing that the silver would be thrown to the potter in the house of the Lord. This connects the specific financial transaction directly to the temple system and a specific outcome, the purchase of a potter's field.
It's this tiny financial detail predicted centuries before that serves as an undeniable narrative lock between prophecy and history.
The prophetic narrative is intentionally setting up the king not for a triumphant coronation, but for humiliation, betrayal, and death.
Okay, let's pause for a second here. The level of detail we're talking about, the density of what we're covering is just incredible.
It really is. I mean, to go from this eternal lineage and divine names all the way down to the specific price of a slave, all laid out across centuries.
Exactly. And, these are the kinds of specific life-changing details that truly inform and inspire. If this kind of deep dive into foundational knowledge is something that is compelling to you, if you want to get a real handle on this kind of material.
It's why having a structured way to learn is so critical.
It is. And that's actually a great moment to tell you about Tyrannus Hall Bible College, THBC. This is a powerful, accessible resource designed for serious learners just like you who demand thorough, high-quality material.
It's about getting that structured theological education delivered right to you.
Get free Bible College online in your inbox. Tyrannus Hall Bible College, THBC. No need to travel hundreds of miles to go to college. All you need is your phone and an internet connection. Start today. Tell all your friends.
Just visit the website.
Visit https://shop.beacons.aak 2020 Tyrannus Hall Bible College. Okay, now let's return to the most intense and really the most critical section of this prophetic arc, the suffering servant.
This is where the necessity of his death is detailed down to the moment, and where the prophecies become alarmingly specific about the method of execution.
This section is absolutely central. It outlines an execution method and spiritual consequences that were predicted centuries before the historical context for those events even existed.
We have to spend significant time here because this is the functional heart of the entire mission. we need to break down the core texts, which are primarily Isaiah 52.13 all the way through chapter 53.
This is where suffering is defined not as a tragic failure, but as a necessary vicarious act.
Vicarious atonement, that's the key concept. It means a substitutionary sacrifice. The text is so emphatic that he's suffering not for his own mistakes. He says the suffering is laid on him for the transgression of my people.
And that's a sharp contrast with many sacrificial practices of the time.
A huge contrast. Those often dealt with communal guilt or unintentional sin. Here, the suffering of this one, innocent Messiah, is said to cleanse the intentional sins of others.
Let's talk about the specific actions. The prophecy says he would be silent before his accusers.
This is critical. The prophet notes, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter. This silence highlights his complete submission to the divine plan.
He refuses to defend himself.
Because a defense would have derailed the entire purpose of the sacrifice. His refusal to speak becomes an act of perfect obedience, ensuring the vicarious act is completed.
And then there's the burial detail. Being buried with the rich, that's a highly specific and unexpected twist for a condemned criminal.
It's a huge twist. For a figure condemned to public execution, the standard practice was often burial in a common, shallow grave for criminals, maybe outside the city walls. The prophecy demands a deviation from that norm.
It ensures that even in death, his dignity is maintained.
By resting in the tomb of an influential, wealthy person, this single detail acts as a final post-mortem marker of prophetic fulfillment.
That granular detail is matched by the intensely spiritual suffering predicted in Psalm 22.
The first verse. This is the prediction of the cry of dereliction. My God, why have you forsaken me?
And this predicted quote, it expresses a depth of suffering that's more than just physical pain.
It's profound theological isolation. This sense of being cut off from the Father is the necessary component of the atonement. He has to bear the full weight of judgment, and that means a temporary severing of that divine intimacy.
And the physical abuse is also detailed without holding back.
Isaiah 50, verse 6, predicts specific abuse. I gave my back to those who strike, and my cheeks to those who pull out the beard. I did not hide my face from insult and spitting.
This is humiliating torture.
And Psalm 22 adds the public mockery, the contempt. It describes how onlookers would be wagging heads, mocking him, challenging his reliance on God.
So we have physical pain, spiritual separation, and public humiliation. It's comprehensive suffering.
And Lamentations 1.12 even speaks of his sorrow being unmatched by any other.
Yeah, we have to get to the direct execution details, and we need to slow down here because this requires some historical context.
This is crucial to the entire argument for prophetic specificity.
Psalm 22, verse 16. It states that his hands and feet would be pierced.
And this is a prediction of crucifixion. It's a Roman execution method, but this was written centuries before the Romans even adopted it widely, and certainly centuries before it was used in the Near East.
So under Jewish law at the time, the penalty for blasphemy or sedition, it would have been stoning, or maybe hanging.
Correct. So how could a prophet, writing in that culture, foresee piercing?
It implies a foreknowledge of the mechanism of death that just transcends the contemporary cultural practices of the author.
It does. The piercing of hands and feet, which is a perfect description of crucifixion, is a specific identifier that locked the messianic event to a future historical period when the governing authority would be using that specific form of capital punishment.
And this piercing detail is affirmed later in Zechariah 12.2. They will look on me whom they have pierced.
Yes. A direct reference to the penetration of the body, establishing the exact mechanism of his death. It also links the event of the piercing to a future moment of widespread recognition and mourning among his people.
We also have these incredibly specific peripheral details, the kind of administrative trivia that provides an undeniable marker.
Psalm 22.18. It predicted his garments would be divided and that lots would be cast for one of them.
This is a trivial detail of an execution, the soldiers dividing up the dead man's meager possessions.
And yet the prophecy dictates that this specific action casting lots for a specific piece of clothing must occur at the execution site.
And finally, there's this powerful connection back to ancient Hebrew tradition, the rule of no bones broken.
This is highlighted in both Exodus 12 and Psalm 34. It's a powerful typological link.
Explain that.
In Exodus, the sacrificial Passover lamb, which symbolically redeems Israel from judgment, was strictly forbidden from having any of its bones broken.
So, by prophesying that the Messiah's bones would not be broken,
the psalm links the suffering servant directly to that sinless, perfect sacrificial lamb.
And in the context of a Roman crucifixion, that was not a guarantee. The Romans had a practice, crucifixion.
Breaking the victim's legs to hasten death by asphyxiation. For this prophecy to be fulfilled, that standard Roman procedure had to be interrupted or avoided entirely.
So the physical circumstances of his death had to align perfectly with the highest theological requirements for a perfect sacrifice.
Exactly. Humiliating, public, vicarious, and perfectly aligned with the symbolic requirements of the Passover.
So the narrative absolutely cannot end with death. The mission of the suffering servant demands a reversal. This next segment, the resurrection, it transforms that tragic failure into the ultimate triumph.
It is the necessary vindication. The resurrection isn't some miraculous add-on at the end. It's a theological and prophetic necessity. Without it, the vicarious atonement fails.
Our sources point immediately to the assurance of life in Psalm 16.9, that God will not allow his Holy One to see decay.
This establishes a critical time limit. Decay, corruption, that's the natural process that begins after death. The prophecy demands that he must rise before that process begins, ensuring the purity of the sacrifice remains intact.
It's the theological safeguard of his divinity.
The Holy One cannot experience decay. And then in Psalm 118, we find a direct declaration of survival and triumph.
I shall not die, but I shall live and recount the deeds of the Lord.
This sets up the dynamic tension that only a resurrection can resolve. The prophetic arc required the servant to be killed, yet it also required him to live to fulfill the eternal kingship promises.
The only way to resolve that contradiction
Is through resurrection.
and the timeline is specific too, isn't it? The duration of time in the grave.
Extremely critical for historical confirmation. Hosea 6.2 predicts being raised on the third day. That establishes the exact chronological periods for his time in death.
And then there's the typological sign related to this from the book of Jonah.
Right, Jonah 1.17. Jonah spends 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish. This serves as a prophetic pattern for the death and resurrection period.
So the sign isn't being swallowed by a fish.
No, the sign is the duration and the depths. 3 days. It connects the fate of the Messiah to this earlier typological event and establishes the grave as a temporary vessel from which the servant must emerge.
And the resurrection also ties the suffering back to the ultimate success of the mission itself.
Absolutely. Isaiah 53, right after detailing his death, says that after his soul is made an offering for guilt, he shall see his offspring, he shall prolong his days.
The resurrection proves the suffering was successful.
That the price was paid completely and the mission achieved its goal. Death didn't defeat the servant. It was the very mechanism of his success.
And this leads to the future hope found in Daniel 12, linking the resurrection of the Messiah to the final universal vindication and the promise of everlasting life.
Yes, the vindication of the one, the Messiah, leads to the hope of the vindication for the many. His rising is the guarantee that death itself is conquered, cementing the success of the entire prophetic plan.
So if the suffering servant successfully navigated betrayal, torture, death, and resurrection, what does that all mean for his ultimate status?
The conclusion of the arc has to be about power, authority, and eternal rule.
It has to fulfill those divine kingship promises made all the way back in Genesis and 2 Samuel.
The rejected, suffering, and resurrected figure must now assume his proper station of ultimate authority.
And that position is described in Psalm 110.1. The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand.
That's far more than just a ceremonial position. In the ancient Near East, to be seated at the king's right hand meant you were vested with executive power, authority to judge, co-regency.
So for the Messiah to be at God's right hand.
It places him in the ultimate seat of honor and eternal co-authority. It confirms the divine identity we talked about at the very beginning.
This is where the whole narrative fully coheres, connecting the despised servant back to the powerful, eternal ruler.
Precisely. Daniel 7 confirms this. It describes the Son of Man approaching the Ancient of Days and receiving eternal dominion, glory, and a kingdom that will never pass away.
The temporary humiliation and death paved the way for this permanent, universal kingship.
And that title, Son of Man, links the human historical figure back to the divine cosmic ruler.
Our sources also point to a critical passage in Daniel about the timing of this whole sequence.
Daniel 9. It's perhaps the most detailed chronological prophecy in the Old Testament.
It describes a period of 70 weeks of years, after which everlasting righteousness will be established and the Messiah will be cut off, killed.
This provides an incredibly restrictive temporal framework. It ties the event of the death to the outcome of eternal righteousness, confirming the Messiah must appear and be executed within a specific historical window.
And we also see the dual role of the Messiah finalized in Zechariah 6.
Yes, as the priest-king who rules on the throne.
This resolves a major historical tension in Israel. The kingship was for the tribe of Judah, David's line, and the priesthood was for the tribe of Levi, Aaron's line.
And those roles were strictly separated. For the Messiah to be both, he has to collapse that separation. He is the one who rules and performs the ultimate atoning sacrifice.
And finally, the reward for all that suffering is explicitly mentioned in Isaiah 53:12.
Therefore, I will divide him a portion with the great. The humiliation is fully recompensed with the highest possible honor. Because he poured out his soul to death and bore the sin of many, he is rewarded.
The prophetic narrative concludes with absolute triumph.
Total success of the vicarious mission.
So, to synthesize all this knowledge for you, the listener, we've just reviewed an immense prophetic structure, spanning 1,000 years of literature, written by dozens of individuals who had no way of collaborating on a single biographical blueprint.
It's just staggering when you lay it all out. Reviewing the 6 stages: the birth, foretold lineage, Bethlehem, virgin birth, divine nature, then the ministry described, miracles, parables, the harbinger.
Then he's rejected and betrayed. The cornerstone paradox, the intimate betrayal, the 30 pieces of silver, which leads to being crucified in detail, the piercing, the silence, the vicarious atonement, no bones broken.
Followed by being resurrected and vindicated on the 3rd day with no decay in triumph. And finally, his exaltation and reign as priest-king, seated at God's right hand with eternal dominion.
This material just demonstrates the incredible density and precision of these source texts. It moves from the microscopic detail of a financial transaction to the cosmic sweep of eternal dominion. It requires sustained, focused study to grasp the scope.
Which is why structured learning is so vital. And it really raises an important question for you, the learner, to think about. Given this level of detail across so many authors and so much time, what does this convergence imply about the nature of historical knowledge and long-term divine planning?
That's a great question to leave people with. What stands out to you as the most surprising detail?
Was it the piercing of the hands and feet centuries before crucifixion was a known practice? Or was it that tiny, specific financial detail of the betrayal locked into place centuries in advance?
If you appreciate this level of deep, structured learning that cuts through the noise and delivers foundational knowledge, remember that opportunities for serious study are more accessible than ever. We invite you to explore Tyrannus Hall Bible College, THBC.
It's about making serious study available to you wherever you are.
Get free Bible College online in your inbox. Tyrannus Hall Bible College, THBC. No need to travel hundreds of miles to go to college. All you need is your phone and an internet connection. Start today. Tell all your friends.
The information is right there on the site.
Just visit https://shop.beacons.aaa 2020 Tyrannus Hall Bible College.
Well, we hope this deep dive has given you the shortcut you needed to be thoroughly well-informed on this remarkable and complex body of work.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next deep dive.